"She's losing her mind," my daughter-in-law whispered to the doctor, squeezing my hand like she cared. Forgetting names, repeating herself, leaving the stove on. I sat there, nodding slowly, playing the confused old woman. What she didn't know. I'd been recording every lie for the past 6 months. And tonight, at the family dinner she planned, I was going to hit play. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. My name is Evelyn Richardson. I'm 74 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought my daughter-in-law Vanessa was the sweetest thing that ever happened to my son Thomas. She had this way of lighting up a room, you know? The kind of woman who remembered everyone's birthday, who brought homemade cookies to the church bake sale, who always had a kind word and a warm smile. When Thomas first brought her home 3 years ago, I'll admit I was skeptical. She was 15 years younger than him, beautiful in that effortless way some women are, and she worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative. But over time, she won me over. She'd call me just to chat, ask for my recipes, sit with me at family gatherings when others were too busy. "You're like the mother I always wished I had," she told me once, tears in her eyes. I believed her. God help me, I believed every word. My husband Richard died 8 years ago. Heart attack, sudden and brutal. He left me comfortable, not wealthy, but comfortable. The house was paid off, I had savings, a modest pension, and Richard's life insurance. Enough to live independently, travel a little, help my boys when they needed it. Thomas was my youngest. Always sensitive, always trusting. His brother Daniel was the opposite, sharp and cynical, successful in business but terrible at relationships. Thomas taught middle school history, loved his students, and wanted nothing more than a simple, happy life. When he married Vanessa 2 years ago, I gave them $20,000 as a wedding gift. "Start your life right," I told them. "No debt, no stress." Vanessa cried and hugged me. "Mom, I don't know what to say. You're too generous." "Family takes care of family," I said. I meant it then. I'd do anything for my boys. But that was before I caught her stealing from my purse. It was a Tuesday morning in March, one of those crisp, clear days when the sun streams through the kitchen windows and makes everything look clean and possible. I'd come downstairs early, around 6:30 a.m., to make coffee and read the newspaper. That was my routine. Always had been. But when I walked into the kitchen, I saw her. Vanessa was standing by the counter where I always left my purse, my wallet open in her hands. She was pulling something out, bills, folded neatly. Her back was to me, and for a moment I just stood there, frozen, watching her fingers move through my wallet with practiced ease. "Good morning," I said quietly. She spun around so fast she nearly dropped the wallet. Her face went white, then red, then settled into that familiar smile. But I'd seen the flash of panic in her eyes. Just for a second, but it was there. "Oh, Mom," she laughed, her voice too bright. "You scared me. I was just looking for a stamp. Thomas said you keep them in your wallet." I didn't keep stamps in my wallet. I never had. They were in the desk drawer in the den, same place they'd been for 30 years. "Of course, dear," I said, moving slowly to the coffee maker. "Help yourself." She set the wallet down carefully, too carefully. "Actually, I think I have some at home. I'll just grab those." She left quickly, kissing my cheek on the way out. "See you Sunday for dinner." After she was gone, I checked my wallet. Nothing was missing. But I knew what I'd seen. That's when I started watching. The next week, I noticed $40 missing from my dresser drawer. I kept emergency cash there, always had. It was in an envelope marked household, and I checked it every Saturday when I did my weekly accounting. $40, gone. I didn't say anything. The week after that, I wrote a check to the electric company for $132. I mailed it myself, walked it to the mailbox at the end of my street like I always did. But when I checked my bank statement 2 weeks later, the check had never cleared. I called the utility company. "I'm checking on my payment," I said. "I sent a check 2 weeks ago." The woman on the phone clicked through her computer. Mrs. Richardson. Yes, your account is current. The payment was made in cash on the 14th. In cash? I asked. Yes. Someone came into our office and paid in person. I hung up and sat at my kitchen table, staring at the phone. Someone had intercepted my check, cashed it somehow, and paid my bill in cash. Someone who wanted to make sure I didn't notice money missing from my account. That someone was Vanessa. That's when her real campaign began. It was subtle at first. Small comments, little seeds of doubt planted in casual conversation. We'd be at Sunday dinner, the whole family gathered around Thomas and Vanessa's dining room table, and she'd say things like, "Mom called me 3 times yesterday asking what time we were coming over, even though I'd already told her 2 p.m. I'd never called her. Not once." Thomas would glance at me with concern in his eyes. "Mom, are you feeling okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart," I'd say, smiling. But I could see the doubt taking root. A week later, Vanessa sighed as she helped me put away groceries after a shopping trip. "Mom, you bought milk again. You already have 3 cartons in the fridge." I opened the refrigerator. She was right. 3 cartons of milk, all different brands, all opened, all dated from different weeks. But I'd only bought 1 carton. Ever. I lived alone. 1 carton lasted me a week and a half. "Oh my," I said, playing along. "I must have forgotten." Vanessa's hand touched my shoulder, warm and soft. "It's okay, Mom. It happens at your age. Maybe we should start making shopping lists together." At your age. Like I was ancient. Like I was already slipping away from reality. That night, I sat in my living room, the same room where Richard and I had raised our boys, where we'd celebrated birthdays and Christmases and ordinary Tuesday evenings. I looked around at my bookshelves, still organized alphabetically. My bills, paid on time every month for 50 years. My calendar, marked with appointments I never missed. I wasn't confused. I wasn't forgetting things. I was being set up. The next morning, I drove to Target. I walked slowly through the aisles, taking my time, and bought 3 specific items: a digital voice recorder the size of a USB drive, a small spiral notebook, and a pack of batteries. If Vanessa wanted to play games, I'd play too. But I'd play smarter. The first recording came 2 days later. I'd clipped the tiny recorder to the inside of my cardigan pocket, hidden beneath a decorative pin my sister had given me for my birthday. It was completely invisible. I wore it to my doctor's appointment on Thursday afternoon. Vanessa had insisted on driving me. "Mom, you really shouldn't be on the road alone anymore. What if you got confused and took a wrong turn?" I hadn't gotten confused driving in 60 years. But I smiled and said, "Thank you, dear. That's very thoughtful." We sat in Dr. Palmer's waiting room, surrounded by outdated magazines and the smell of antiseptic. Vanessa leaned close to the receptionist, a young woman with tired eyes and a kind smile. "I'm worried about her memory," Vanessa said softly, just loud enough for others to hear. "She's been very confused lately." I sat right there, 3 feet away, pretending to flip through a magazine about gardening. Pretending I couldn't hear. The receptionist glanced at me with sympathy. "That must be difficult." "It is," Vanessa sighed. "But family takes care of family, right?" When Dr. Palmer called me in, Vanessa followed without asking. She'd been coming to my appointments for the past few months, another thing I'd thought was kindness. "Mrs. Richardson," Dr. Palmer said warmly. He was a good man, had been my doctor for 20 years. "How have you been feeling?" Before I could open my mouth, Vanessa spoke up. "Doctor, I need to be honest with you. I'm worried about her. She's been forgetting things. Important things. Last week, she left the stove on for hours. I came by to visit and found it still burning, no pot, no nothing. She didn't even remember turning it on." My hands tightened in my lap. I hadn't touched the stove that day. I'd been at church all morning, then lunch with my sister Margaret. "Is that true, Evelyn?" Dr. Palmer asked, his pen poised over his clipboard. I looked down at my hands, at my wedding ring still on my finger after all these years. Then I nodded slowly. I suppose I've been a little forgetful lately. The lie tasted like metal on my tongue. But I needed this recorded. Needed him to hear her lies documented by a medical professional. Vanessa continued, her voice dropping into that practiced tone of concern. She also gets confused about what day it is. Tuesday, she thought it was Thursday. She made a whole pot of roast for Sunday dinner on Wednesday, completely forgot we'd changed plans. None of that happened. And she's been misplacing things constantly, Vanessa went on. Her keys, her glasses, even her purse. Last week, we found her purse in the freezer. I'd never put my purse in the freezer. But there it was, another lie, documented. Dr. Palmer scribbled notes, his expression growing more concerned. We should run some cognitive tests, Evelyn. Just to be safe. There are early screening tools for dementia and Alzheimer's. I think that's a very good idea, Vanessa said, squeezing my hand. We just want to make sure she's okay. I nodded meekly. Whatever you think is best. That recording was number 1. By the time Thanksgiving rolled around 6 months later, I had 53 more. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Over the next few months, Vanessa's lies became bolder, more elaborate. She told Thomas I'd forgotten to pay my mortgage, so he offered to take over my finances. I showed him my bank statements, every payment made on time for 30 years, but he looked at me with such sad eyes. Mom, it's okay to need help, he said. I didn't need help. But I smiled and said, maybe you're right. She told him I'd gotten lost driving to the grocery store, that she'd found me wandering in the parking lot, confused about where I'd parked. So Thomas took my car keys. Just for a little while, Mom. Until we figure out what's going on. I hadn't been confused. I'd parked in my usual spot, row C, space 12. Same place I'd parked for 15 years. She told my sister Margaret that I'd called her by the wrong name, called her Susan, who was a friend from high school I hadn't spoken to in decades. Margaret called me that evening, her voice heavy with worry. Evelyn, sweetie, are you okay? Vanessa said you were confused about who I was. I'm fine, I said, but even Margaret looked at me differently after that. But I documented everything. Every conversation, every lie, every moment she thought I was too far gone to notice what she was doing. I also started digging into my finances. Really digging. I pulled every bank statement from the past year and laid them out on my dining room table. Richard used to do our accounting right here, his reading glasses perched on his nose, his careful handwriting filling ledgers with our expenses. Now I did the same, going line by line through every transaction. That's when I found the real theft. Over 6 months, $12,000 had been withdrawn from my savings account. Small amounts, careful amounts. 200 here, 300 there, 500 once. Never more than 700 at a time. Always just under the threshold that would trigger a fraud alert. I called my bank and asked for copies of the withdrawal slips. They arrived a week later in a manila envelope. Every single one had been signed Evelyn Richardson. But it wasn't my signature. It was close, very close. Someone had practiced. The E had the same loop, the A had the same slant. But the middle letters were off, too careful, too deliberate. My real signature was quick and fluid after 74 years of signing my name. This one was calculated. I took the slips to a notary public and had them certified as official copies. Then I looked up handwriting analysts in the phone book. Yes, I still used the phone book. Old habits. I found one 40 minutes away, a retired police forensics expert named Donald Chen. I drove myself there, my keys back in my possession when Thomas was at work, and paid $300 for a professional analysis. Mr. Chen examined the signatures under a magnifying glass, compared them to samples of my real signature, and gave me his report 2 weeks later. These are forgeries, he said plainly. Good forgeries, but forgeries nonetheless. The person who signed these tried to mimic your handwriting but lacked the muscle memory that makes a signature unique. Can you prove it in court? I asked. Absolutely. I put everything in a folder. The recordings, all 53 of them. The bank statements with the fraudulent withdrawals highlighted in yellow. The handwriting analysis report. The grocery receipts proving I hadn't bought duplicate items. I even pulled my cell phone records and highlighted every call I'd made or received, proving I hadn't made the phantom calls Vanessa claimed. By November, I had a case that would hold up in any court in the country. But I didn't want court. Not yet. I wanted Thanksgiving dinner. Vanessa had insisted on hosting at their house this year. Mom, you've done Thanksgiving for 40 years. Let me take over. You deserve a break. Thomas agreed immediately. Mom, you've earned it. Just show up and enjoy yourself. No cooking, no cleaning, just family. So, I agreed. I baked a pumpkin pie, my specialty, the one Richard always said was better than his mother's. And on Thanksgiving Day, I dressed carefully in my navy blue dress, the one I wore to church. I did my hair, put on my pearl earrings, and picked up my handbag. Inside that handbag, one voice recorder, one folder of evidence, and 6 months of carefully suppressed rage. I arrived at 3 p.m. sharp. Their house was full of people and noise. Thomas's brother Daniel and his wife Patricia, my sister Margaret, Vanessa's parents Robert and Susan, and a few cousins I hadn't seen in years. Everyone greeted me with that careful warmth you reserve for the elderly and infirm. Evelyn, you look wonderful. Margaret said, her voice too bright, too cheerful. How are you feeling, Mom? Daniel asked, searching my face for signs of decline. Patricia touched my arm gently. Can I get you something to drink? Water? Tea? I smiled softly. I'm perfect, dear. Just perfect. Dinner was elaborate. Vanessa had gone all out. A 20-pound turkey, sage stuffing, mashed potatoes, sweet potato casserole, green beans with almonds, cranberry sauce from scratch, homemade rolls, and 3 kinds of pie. She was playing the role perfectly. Perfect hostess, perfect wife, perfect daughter-in-law. As we ate, she made her usual comments. Mom, you already told us that story about the church choir, she said gently, even though I'd been completely silent for the past 10 minutes. Did I? I asked, blinking in confusion. It's okay, she cooed, reaching across the table to pat my hand. We don't mind hearing it again. It's a lovely story. Thomas looked at me with those sad, pitying eyes. Daniel glanced at Patricia. Margaret shifted uncomfortably in her seat. They all believed her. Every single one of them. After dinner, as people were settling into the living room with coffee and dessert plates, Vanessa stood and cleared her throat. Before we have pie, I want to say something. The room went quiet. Everyone turned to look at her. Thomas and I have been talking a lot lately, she began, her hand resting on his shoulder. And we are worried about Mom. We love her so much, and we want what's best for her. My heart started pounding, but I kept my face neutral. We think it's time she moved in with us, Vanessa continued. She's getting older, and we don't think it's safe for her to live alone anymore. Thomas nodded, his expression serious. We've already started looking at options. There's an assisted living facility about 20 minutes from here. Beautiful place, lots of activities. But we'd love to have you here with us first, Mom. See how it goes. Assisted living. They were trying to take everything. My independence, my home, my dignity. The room was completely silent. Everyone was looking at me, waiting. That's very kind of you, I said softly. Vanessa beamed, that radiant smile spreading across her face. We just want you to be safe, Mom. We love you. I reached into my handbag and pulled out the small digital recorder. It looked innocent, almost like a phone. I set it carefully on the coffee table in front of me. Before we talk about that, I said quietly, I'd like everyone to hear something. Thomas frowned. Mom, what is that? This, I said, my voice steady and clear, is the truth. I pressed play. Vanessa's voice filled the living room, crystal clear, every word perfectly audible. She's losing her mind. Forgetting names, repeating herself, leaving the stove on. Dr. Palmer's voice. Is that true, Evelyn? My voice, small and compliant. I suppose I've been a little forgetful lately. Then Vanessa again. She also gets confused about what day it is. Sometimes she thinks it's Thursday when it's really Monday. The color drained from Vanessa's face. I stopped the recording and looked around the room. Everyone was staring at the recorder like it was a bomb. That was from my doctor's appointment in April, I said calmly. I was never forgetful. I never left the stove on. But Vanessa told Dr. Palmer I did. Mom, I can explain, Thomas started, but I held up my hand. I pressed play again. Another recording. Vanessa's voice on the phone, speaking to Margaret. I'm really worried about her, Margaret. She called me by the wrong name yesterday. Called me Susan. I think she might be getting confused. Margaret's voice, concerned and distant. Oh no. That's not good. Margaret's face went white. Evelyn, I never called you by the wrong name, I said quietly. I've never been confused about who you are. But Vanessa needed you to believe I was declining. I played another recording. This one was Vanessa talking to Thomas in their kitchen, not knowing I was standing in the hallway with my recorder running. Your mom is getting worse. Today she asked me 3 times what day it was. I'm scared, Thomas. What if she hurts herself? Thomas's voice, heavy with worry. Maybe we need to think about other living arrangements. I think so too, Vanessa said softly. I love her, but we have to think about her safety. I stopped the recording. Thomas was staring at the device, his mouth slightly open. I have 53 recordings, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. 53 separate lies that Vanessa told about me over the past 6 months. Would you like to hear more? No one spoke. I opened my folder and pulled out the bank statements. But the lies weren't the worst part. This was. I slid the papers across the coffee table to Thomas. $12,000, stolen from my savings account over 6 months. Small withdrawals, always careful, always just under the fraud alert threshold. Thomas picked up the papers with shaking hands, his eyes scanning the highlighted transactions. Every withdrawal slip was signed with a forged version of my signature. I continued, pulling out the handwriting analyst's report. I had an expert examine them. These signatures aren't mine. They are Vanessa's. Vanessa stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. This is insane. You're making this up. You're confused. Am I? I asked calmly. I pulled out my phone records. You told Thomas the first called you 3 times in one day, asking the same question over and over. Here are my phone records from that day. I didn't call you once. I pulled out the grocery receipts. You said I bought 3 cartons of milk because I kept forgetting I already had some. Here are my grocery receipts from the past 6 months. I buy 1 carton every 10 days, exactly as I've done for the past 20 years. You planted those extra cartons in my refrigerator. I pulled out my calendar, marked with appointments in my neat handwriting. You said I showed up for Sunday dinner on Wednesday, completely confused about what day it was. Here's my calendar. Every appointment, every commitment, marked and kept. I've never missed a date in my life. The room was absolutely silent. Even the ticking of the grandfather clock seemed to have stopped. Thomas looked up from the bank statements, his face pale. Vanessa, is this true? She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I've spent 6 months documenting every lie you told, I said, my voice completely steady now. Every theft, every manipulation, every attempt to make people think I was losing my mind. You wanted my house. You wanted my savings. You wanted my independence. And you thought I was too old and too senile to fight back. Tears welled up in Vanessa's eyes, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of fury, of a plan falling apart. You set me up, she hissed. You've been setting me up this whole time. No, I said firmly. I documented the truth. There's a difference. Thomas stood slowly, the bank statements still clutched in his hand. His face had gone from pale to red, his jaw clenched tight. Get out, he said quietly. Vanessa blinked. What? Get out of my house. His voice was low and cold, colder than I'd ever heard it. Right now. Thomas, please, you don't understand, she started, reaching for him. He stepped back, away from her touch. You stole from my mother. You lied about her to everyone we know. You made me doubt her, made me think she was losing her mind. You tried to have her declared incompetent so you could take everything she has. His voice cracked, and I saw tears in his eyes. I trusted you. I loved you. And you were going to put my mother in a home so you could steal her life. Vanessa looked around the room wildly, searching for an ally, someone who would defend her. But everyone was staring at her with the same mixture of shock, disgust, and horror. Daniel's face was hard. Margaret was crying. Even Vanessa's own parents looked horrified. Robert, Vanessa's father, stood slowly. Susan, get your coat. We are leaving. Daddy, please, Vanessa started, but he held up his hand. We'll talk about this later. At home. Vanessa grabbed her purse, her hands shaking. At the doorway, she turned back one last time. You'll regret this, she said to me, her voice venomous. All of you will regret this. Then she was gone, the door slamming behind her so hard the pictures on the wall rattled. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Margaret stood and walked over to me. She knelt down and took my hands in hers, tears streaming down her face. Evelyn, I'm so sorry. I should have believed you. I should have known. You didn't know, I said quietly, squeezing her hands. That was the point. She was very good at what she did. Thomas sank into a chair, his head in his hands. Mom, I don't even know what to say. I walked over and placed my hand on his shoulder, just like I'd done 1,000 times when he was a boy and the world seemed too big and scary. You don't have to say anything, sweetheart. Just promise me you'll be more careful about who you trust. He looked up at me, his eyes red and swimming with tears. I'm so sorry. I should have believed you. You're my mother. I should have known. You're human, I said gently. She was convincing. That's what predators do. Over the next few weeks, I filed a police report. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, the forged signatures, the handwriting analysis, the bank statements. The detective assigned to my case was a woman in her 50s named Sarah Chen. Mrs. Richardson, she said, reviewing my folder with something like awe in her eyes, this is the most thoroughly documented case of elder financial abuse I've ever seen. Most victims don't even realize what's happening until it's too late. I wasn't going to be a victim, I said. Vanessa was arrested 3 days later. She tried to claim I was confused, that I'd given her permission to access my accounts, that the recordings were taken out of context. But the evidence spoke for itself. The handwriting analyst testified. Dr. Palmer testified about the false reports. My bank testified about the unauthorized withdrawals. Even the grocery store provided receipt records showing my regular, consistent purchases. Vanessa's lawyer tried to paint me as a vindictive old woman with a grudge, but it fell apart when they played the recordings in court. You can't argue with someone's own voice, caught in lie after lie after lie. She was convicted of fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse. The judge sentenced her to 3 years in prison and ordered her to pay full restitution. Thomas filed for divorce the day after her arrest. The proceedings were swift. The prenup he'd wisely insisted on before they married protected him from her claims. She walked away with nothing. As for me, I'm still in my house, still sharp as a tack, still baking pies and going to church on Sundays. My sister visits twice a week now. Thomas comes for dinner every Sunday. We don't talk about Vanessa much. Sometimes Thomas apologizes again, and I tell him the same thing. The past is past. What matters is that we learn the truth before it was too late. Because that's the thing about people like Vanessa. They count on you being silent. They count on you being weak. They count on you being so afraid of causing conflict that you'll accept their version of reality without question. But I wasn't silent. I wasn't weak. And I definitely wasn't senile. I was patient. I was strategic. And I was absolutely done being anyone's victim. In the end, patience is the sharpest weapon of all. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments.